If that's not going to be there, then one is you're already you're creating a generation of smartphones and dumb people, right? And I also felt podcasts are really important because there's an element of relatability, there's an element of intimacy in podcasts where you don't really get with broadcast.
With me today, I have Akshobh Giridharadas. He's a former broadcast journalist in Singapore, now a geopolitical analyst in Washington, D.C., podcaster, columnist, and two-time TEDx speaker. Today, we'll talk a little bit more about podcasting, how we consume media, how we are interacting online, and where do we deem what to be trustworthy in today's time. Akshobh, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you so much for having me, Zivko. I'm excited for this conversation.
Fantastic. Now, what we'll start with first is this medium. Let's talk about podcasting. How did podcasting, from what you've seen throughout the years, became this massive thing where you have people like Joe Rogan that can overtake in listenership, viewership, and opinions, massive multimedia industries?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ziko. And it's really telling because I started my career in broadcast. And the way I think about this is there's a very famous song, Video Killed the Radio Star. It spoke about the time from when our fathers were growing up, when they listened to it on radio, and then video came along, right? And then video became the dominant media. But there's something that's a profound question we ask ourselves: video killed the radio star, why a podcast, which essentially were audio platforms. Of course, we are in a podcast, some people call it a vodcast, we have video. Why are they back? And to understand this, you have to kind of think about this in an economic sense of things, right? Or when I was in broadcast, one of the networks I worked for told me that they had a select criteria of people on air if they looked a certain way or had a certain accent. And I found that very ridiculous, but because everyone looks a certain way, everyone has some accent. It may not be the accent that you identify with, but there is no one, even as much as you say neutral accent, there's no one. Neutral to you is abnormal to someone else, right? You have to be coherent, clear, enunciate, and I feel that can happen. And I just thought about this for a long time. And I just thought about it. If you just think about it during our grandfather's generation, how was they consuming information? Media was one-way information. Or even our father's generation. You had to listen to the radio to know when World War II broke out. You needed a top people gathered around 8 p.m. to watch the news to be informed. The next morning, you depended on the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, whatever paper you got in whatever country you lived in, whatever language to be informed. But today, information is precious, but is no longer rare, right? Because you have this on the go. If you have not read the New York Times this morning, are you uninformed? No, you will read it some other time. You don't have to read it at 8 a.m. You could read it at 11 a.m. You could read it when you want. And this information will come to you when you want it, and you can choose and curate your information. And I think what's happened is what I realized when one of the former news organizations I worked for told me that was this was like the Gilded Age. If you think about it, why did the Andrew Carnegies of the world, all these people become rich? It's because people had access to, only few people had access to certain things, to gold or to certain industries, right? As great as all these anchors may be, Anderson Cooper, John King, Wolf Blitzer, but we don't know the 40, 50, 400,000 people that beat out to it. And which is why they had access to that platform, like CNN in this case, where they could be the people in charge of it. And ergo, if you look at a trend, they are there for 30, 40 years. And it's also based on the subjectivity of a producer, a senior executive producer liking you to give you the opportunity. Like Ziko, if you want to have your voice heard, and if you didn't have the podcast and the internet medium, you have to depend on a major broadcaster to giving you the chance. And today you're good, tomorrow they don't like your face, Or if you want to have your words read, you depend on a major publication. So I would say before podcast, there's something else started happening that allowed people to have their opinions. Blogs. Now, you might think, oh, what is a WordPress or what's a Substack? But Substack today has become popular. But what's a WordPress back then? But today, you're like, I don't need the New York Times to take my column. I'll find another column, I'll find other publications, or I'll have my own Substack. And I think that ties into your question about podcasts, because what's beautiful about this, Vico, is it's democratization of information. You don't need, because why do you need to depend on the esoteric permission of 2 or 3 people to decide if you're good or not? Of course, it matters more if you're prime time on a major news network. It matters more if you're a columnist in New York Times. But at the same time, not everyone can do that. It doesn't mean that everyone who's not in the New York Times or CNN or BBC and these are all just names I'm naming for brands.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're not important. So I think what people saw is with blogs that came out and YouTube was free. So you put your content out there. Yes, it's harder to monetize. You're not going to get as many likes and views as necessarily as a big platform, but that can change. And the people you mentioned, the Joe Rogans of the world or Pod Save America, or any podcaster, that information's out there as well. And the reason that information out there when it is because we live in the digital age where you consume CNN the same way you consume Joe Rogan on your internet, on your YouTube streaming service. You no longer depend on the idiot box of television. So ergo, I think the democratization of information is one. Two is the fact that too few people controlled a very rich organization and they decided what was it. Imagine if you only had one or two banks that decided only where you put your money, right? Then you can't invest in anything else. That's not fair. That's exactly the problem is how these major news organizations all work. Only few people had the platforms, had this, and they decided who they wanted. Ergo, I'm not saying any of these anchors are bad or good. That's up to you. But we don't know the other people that could have been there out there, right? Imagine if a restaurant only said there are only 4 items and you can only eat this food in the whole city. You may like them, they may be good dishes, but you don't know anything else, right? So I think the abundance of choice was important, and people did not like the fact that a lot of people are controlling that information. I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything here. I'm just going to say that when I say controlling, as in it's the access to information. You don't want just 4 broadcast networks or 4 papers. You want more out there, and you want to have that. So put your podcast out there. You may get 10 views, it may get 10 million views. But that's the beauty. It's a democratization of information.
It's very interesting because when we're talking about democratization of the information, you can listen to a political podcast, but you can also listen to a podcast about someone talking about miniature models, and that is a lot of people tune into. Or you have the streamers of video games that a lot of people will listen to what they say and how they are playing, because maybe they're not in a political or a business. They would focus on something. There's a podcast where back in the day there wasn't so many, like the channel covers National Geographic, and that's about it. There's no sub niches within those things because it was limited. Now with that kind of expansion, I see there's a lot of people that are listening to people on YouTube, Twitch, Discord, Twitter Spaces. You have people that, someone like, Joe Rogan is an example, but Philip DeFranco show, you would have a lot of people that would listen to him for the daily news versus listening to someone else that is from CNN or from BBC or from Reuters or from Deutsche. And now, why have you seen people are switching to listen to more to YouTubers and people that are streaming versus legacy media?
I think it's one word, relatability, right? Because they see some of these people, whether you agree or disagree with them, as more of their own. Like in the sense, people who've come through, oh, you have a podcast? I can have a podcast. Okay, you have a podcast that people listen to. Obviously, you and I are not Joe Rogan. We don't have, and some would argue right now, podcasters are now become the new broadcast. Like Joe Rogan has a team of 200 people about it as well. But if you just think about it also, people see relatability, that it's not, when you start reading the New York Times or CNN, there was no you may like the news, but there was no relatability to Wolf Blitzer or Anderson Cooper because they already started off at a high level. There was no amateur becoming pro level, right? That people do, right? As compared to, why do you relate more to contemporaries of yours who go on to become famous sports stars or actors some ways? Because you're like, oh wait, what was I doing at 18? I was in college. What was I doing at 25? In some job I don't like. They're already winning Wimbledon at 25, or so there's an element of some form of empathy with that. Two is you see it ironically, even though a lot of these do have sponsorship and they're able to raise money, you see it more as not corporate media coming to you, right? You see it as a less like, it's not the man, but it's a man, like bringing you the information. I think also what it is because there's also massive trust deficit that people have with the media, right? Whether you agree or disagree with it, whether you agree with how politics has gone on in the US or other parts of the world, it's because people, I don't like using terms like mainstream media because that becomes a more conservative talking point, but that is a fair point, that people felt that one section was not, whether you disagree with them or agree with them, people felt that one section was not heard, so ergo they came up with more conservative media. I think that went a little extreme as well. But so podcasters now it's the ability to curate the information you want. Maybe you like the guest they get, right? And I also felt podcasts are really important because there's an element of relatability, there's an element of intimacy in podcasts where you don't really get with broadcast. Like there was a difference when you watched Anderson Cooper, you watched Oprah. Why do people watch Oprah? Not because it's the most informative show. You don't need to watch Oprah to know, but oh my God, how many people die of smoking and lung cancer every year. You could get that in any medical journal, but you found that because there's a way Oprah would tell it to you. The Oprah would get a young child who's got 14 who's probably suffering from it, and that appealed to a certain section of the population very well, right? So I feel that there's an element of that intimacy, that conversations. Perhaps it's not live, it's not paid for by corporate sponsors sometimes, and people feel it's more relatable. And also look at what's happened right now. You've seen Tucker Carlson, Piers Morgan, Mehdi Hassan, all well-known anchors who made it in the mainstream, who now, because they needed that platform to become famous and big, they now set up their own networks, which are equally big as well. So in some ways, it's kind of like being a sports manager. You have to be a ball player to, get your fame to be able to get that other job. So in some ways, you need to do that. But why are they doing that? Because they feel that you don't need to just have a mainstream broadcast anymore, right? Like everything has choices. Everything, people have choices. You can't say there's only one gym, there's only one restaurant, there's only one suit shop in town. Like people want choices, and that's what I think it is. It's harder to stand out, but democracy of choice is important.
How do you feel? Because this is something that is interesting when we're talking about choices. How do you feel about some people say there's a double standard? Podcasters and people that are streamers or that are on YouTube get off easily, where a media outlet will be punished or they will be sued. For example, recently, I think it was Nelk Boys, I think that's what they're called, with Benjamin Netanyahu, where everybody said you guys were completely not prepared. Like the guy steamrolled any message he wanted. You were not prepared to push back. You did not have information to ask him potent questions. It was just like, let someone talk, and you two were like, if that was a media outlet, there would be different of how people would accept what was said on that show. Do you feel that there's a double standard or unfairness or any disbalance between what can be said on a podcast versus what can be said on a media outlet?
To an extent, yes. What can be said on a podcast depends on the podcaster as well. Like, I mean, Piers Morgan calls the show Piers Morgan Uncensored. Mehdi Hassan calls the show Mehdi Hassan Unfiltered, which means they're allowed to curse, and they don't, because it's up to them. So in some ways, it does become like a fiefdom a little bit, because it depends on what one person wants. Whereas broadcast, because it's more a larger setup, it's part of a corporate media thing, it's part of a broadcast regulation in the country. So you can't have profanity, can't have nudity, can't have anything that's untoward, or sometimes the UK has something called fairness doctrine, which you don't have in the US. So you can have very openly conservative and openly liberal platform, whereas in the UK you've got to do a fairness doctrine. You can't just have so that depends on the country's regulation. But I think podcasters, because it's more smaller scale and setup, they can. But yeah, podcasters probably get away more with it because one is, I would say, in absence of HR, right? The HR is the audience of the World Wide Web. The podcasters get cancelled all the time. Like you've seen, podcasters get cancelled. So it's audience of what's out there, right? Like, to give you, and I know this is segueing a little bit, but I'll give you the best example. Me and my partner were at the Coldplay concert, the one that went viral with the astronomer CEO and the CPO. Now that's just 5 seconds of randomness of the Jumbotron. No one knew who they were, and their lives have gone upside down, right? But someone, and it's not like there was some famous CEO. It's not like there was Bill Gates or Tim Cook, the people recognized that. But someone found a way to, just think about it, going to Reddit, and you found how, I mean, what kind of detective sleuths are there? But then after that, you could not control how viral this information went. I mean, is that the first person in the world to cheat? Hell no, won't be the last. There might be others in the audience who were, but they were the only people who got caught, right? And but it's just the sense of what happens after that is once it's out there, the information is no longer yours. You cannot control how it goes, right? Sometimes we've all put out a tweet out there that we thought, oh, it's innocuous, but someone takes offense to it. Someone does this, and it starts a Twitter thread, starts a social media firestorm. That's sometimes you can't control that. So sometimes some podcasters love it. Some people live off it. It's in some ways it's like some people get adrenaline going shark cage diving. Other people are not scared. So like some podcasters love it, because they feel it adds clicks. And some people say no such thing as bad PR. All publicity is good publicity. I'm more conservative that way, in the sense that I just like having conversation like this with yourself. I'm not trying to be a provocateur. I'm not trying to be a gadfly. But yeah, I think podcasters sometimes get away with it because it's smaller, it's their own setup, and they can. But however, they can get cancelled. The repercussions are still out there for everyone else. Yeah?
Now, if you're looking at from that perspective, that podcasters do get away a little bit more because there is the audience is smaller, the opinions are kind of more restricted. It's not broadcasted to everyone, and once the information is out, is out. We talk about like once the information is out and how that is being channeled. Do you see people trusting AI more than broadcasting channels, or trusting more than the information they see from people that are doing podcasts or journalists from the New York Times or Wall Street?
Good question. I think there's a lot of talk about AI regulation because this is so big tech, and that's what we spoke about, things like big banks and big oil and big pharma. So now we have big tech also, because given it's so complex, and the reason why it's also called big something is, one is just how powerful these organizations are and how limited access or control that you have to understand these or understand technology. Obviously, there are people more qualified to understand AI. I think there are a couple of things. A lot of people understand that AI is here. You can't be the industrial evolution. You can't be a Luddite, take the machine and smash it. What do? You find a way to live with it. Do people trust AI? Depends. I think sometimes the AI algorithm is wrong, sometimes it's right. But people find it a useful tool. The irony is the people you're listening to right now may use AI. Like I know AI in the newsrooms, AI writing mundane stories. For example, our podcast summary right now, you may not need a transcriber. You can just put it through AI generation software and it'll give you the transcript. So is AI always accurate? No. I'm pretty sure you're in my name, AI won't be able to spell it accurately. It's not a Tom Smith name. So what do you do, right? So you need to also verify your own information. You need to not touch things blindly, because then you become the things that you were most afraid of. The machines are here, the robots are coming and rising. That's because why do people fear this? Why do we always have these stories where we fear ghosts, we fear aliens, even though there's no proof of little green men or extraterrestrial or supernatural beings here? But because what we can't see, what we can't control, what we're scared of, right? And that's some ways AI. AI is not tangible. AI is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. You can't touch AI. It's the artificial element of AI means it's not a tangible asset, but it's everywhere. I was just talking to someone about this today, a colleague of mine who works in AI. I just said AI is the way we spoke about the World Wide Web in the 1990s. Oh, how will the internet change us? And the internet back then was, the news you need from your landline to dial in on a modem and search www.google.com or wikipedia.com for something, open ICQ, MSN Messenger, Napster, Friendster, whatever, whereas today the internet is everywhere, nowhere, from the Alexa on voice to your phone to the AirPods, everything, the internet and everything. So AI is also going to be everywhere. One would argue it's already here, but we don't know the extent of AI. Like, will we do this in hologram format? We don't know, right? So, I mean, technically, this is some form of hologram in some ways. You're not in my living room. I'm not where you are in Canada, but we can see each other virtually, which we would not have been able to do. I wouldn't even want to say 20, 25 years back. Maybe I would say 10, 15 years back. Like we couldn't have done this back then. And so in some ways, this is the closest we come to hologram, where we're on each other's video. It feels like we're in person, even though we're not. We can see each other as compared to the imagination. So yeah, so I think people both respect and also fear AI, because they also, no one knows what AI is going to do. Like AI is going to gut jobs, white collar jobs, not manufacturing labor necessarily the same way. Maybe it could. So people also fear what they can't see or what they can't understand.
And when we're talking about where the AI goes in the future, we're afraid of things we don't know. We're just taking assumptions from the past and what we thought when there was like internet, the .com and stuff like that. When you look at it going forward, like 10 to 15 years, when we get in the world where AI writes AI, where AI takes AI calls, where AI code is written, edited by an AI code writer and editor, how would that look like for us? Would we benefit from it? How is it too many questions that we have right now, or that's a real possibility of a future?
We have a lot of questions because we don't know where AI is going right now. As I said in my previous question, like we are in the AI phase of what we were in the 1994 phase of what is the internet, the World Wide Web. What is it? Like I remember a former journalist colleague saying he wrote an article about how the internet will change us. Now that article seems so prosaic and stupid today, but back then we don't know. So we are in the speculative phase. Um, I have some obviously I have a lot of concerns about AI because I have concerns on big tech and regulation. But my concerns are like in the journalism phase. People talk about AI and ChatGPT replacing writers. I think I don't fully agree with that. Because I don't disagree with that, but I disagree with the efficacy of how they replace writers. It's like saying a smart guitar can replace a musician. I think of it as an instrument and not the main thing. Because for me, writing is about experience, writing is about catharsis, writing is about immersion. And if I can ask about Zivko, AI will tell me like, a paragraph, a page, maybe a book on Zivko, depends how much I want. But what AI won't tell me the way your parents and your close friends would is their experience and memories of you, and that feeling of it. And there's the element by technology. There's a thing why you call it robots. And robots also technology because robots don't have the personal feeling about it. And writing for me is a beautiful expression. It's cathartic. It's immersion. It's about a storytelling. It's about take me on this journey. Tell me why this matters to you. I feel also with AI, what we're seeing right now, like you have plagiarism checkers in schools. Students just use AI to write 1,000-word paper. Like I'm a writer, and for every article I write, my dad would always tell me you got to read 5x more. So say there's no one in the world who's a writer who's not doesn't read, and because where else would you get thoughts and ideas from, right? I'll put that literally in context. Say someone is born hearing impaired, but they can speak. They'll still never be able to speak. Why? Because they never heard the words to be able to form sentences. So if you've never read, how will you write? Right? Or if you've never spoken. So, but I also feel that ChatGPT is what, 2, 3, maybe 4 years. Right now, there's enough information out there, enough algorithm out there. But two things happen. One is when you write, there's a sense of curiosity to read and learn more. Right? We already, like you have to read more research, and that curiosity to read and research has to come in. If that's not going to be there, then one is you're already creating a generation of smartphones and dumb people. Right? And the second thing that worries me is in 2036, 2046, when there's enough AI out there, will AI just be quoting AI? Will it just be a fountain of like, right now AI is picking up information, say I wrote in 2014 or something written in 2017. And someone obviously who works in AI will probably debunk me right now. Sure, maybe they could. But I'm like, but if no one's creating original content, then after a while, does it just become AI copying AI? Like, it's kind of like the leftover model of food, right?
Yeah.
It's food made fresh, can't finish it, put in the fridge, no problem. You preserve it, heat it up. 1 day it's good, 2 days good. But if you do it after 6-7 days, it becomes stale. It doesn't, it loses its value, loses nutrients, and it just becomes bad for you at that point, right?
Yeah.
It's like fountain water. Like a fountain just keeps circulating the same water. It's like a donkey sometimes, donkey may do hard work, but it's not moving. It's going or running on the treadmill, as we say. Like, sure, that's exercise too. But if your job is to accomplish distance, not just distance like, I ran 6.4 miles, but go from point A to point B, then running on the treadmill is not going to help, right? So I don't know if I'm sure there'll be critiques of my analogy, which are fair, but my concern what I've seen right now, if AI is only quoting AI, and I've seen right now with people just using AI, ChatGPT to write op-eds, then what's your thought? What's your opinion? What's your expression? What's your,
Yeah, it's something interesting that I heard from a professor while I was talking with them, and he's like, I changed the way that I teach after AI. I'm like, good or bad way? He's like, it's just different because in year one, we just kind of stopped it, blocked it completely. In year two, professors were using it. So like, what are you trying to achieve here? But once we figured out, and he was like, this is my personal way of doing it. My assignments changed to not have so much research, because back in the day, with internet being available, research was like, okay, great, you have a lot of information at your fingertips, go and do your research and come up with defend your thesis. Now I don't ask you to do that much research because ChatGPT will do that research for you. Now I'm going more for critical thinking, more from problem solving, real application that AI might get you somewhere, but it is still not there today. And he's like, it's not about blocking it, it's about how do I enhance a student? Because I know that the way that we use Microsoft Office, back in the day, no one did, but it's just a part of normal life. So I think AI will be part of their lives, but I don't want it to be a block where they're just not thinking and everything is down to research. They run through ChatGPT for the research. I want to see that you can actually do problem solving, because that is not there at all. And we do see it all the time that when it comes to difficult or complex problem solving, the AI agents, the agentic stuff, it still needs a human input. It's not perfect. Like the story that we're sold, sure, but not the one that you and I have, the $20 chat GPT. That one is still miles away. Do you think there is a way that AI is regulated so that it coexists as opposed to take over what kind of Google did back in the day with data privacy, just run wild with it?
Yeah, I mean, two things. One is, based on problem solving, you had some of the best problem solvers create a problem solving machine, because AI is not in some prophecy or biblical doctrine that was just given to us like some 10 commandments, right? People created it, people created it. So you had the most complex computer scientists, data scientists, and whatever, technology gurus, and maybe mathematicians or mathematic models, all of that came into play that created this, right? So the irony of that, like maybe they left their own stuff redundant. It's almost like a prisoner building his own gulag, right? Like, you just that's one. I think your question of regulation, yes, and people will always be like, the problem in this country right now, the US, is it gets so polarized to have any conversation on this. Like, people think of everything as socialist, everything as capitalist, and the idea is it's neither, right? Like, because these words have become bad words, and in a political polarization. And I always say it's not a Manichaean duopoly. You have to say capitalism from capitalist and say socialism socialist. You can't have 100% capitalism, because private fire engine will only come if you pay your fire engine bill, and if your house and your body's burning, they won't come, or 911 won't answer your call if you're not paying your 911 bill, or whatever. I mean, at the same time, we've seen what 100% socialism has done, right? Like, then there's no free enterprise, there's no aspiration, no entrepreneurial goals. So you have to do that. So same thing again, people, when you use out regulation, people are like, oh my God, no, you're trying to regulate business, free market, all of that. Look, you have... Someone has got to have fiduciary responsibility. At a kernel level, it may not be the right government, it may not be the right policy maker, it may not be the right policy, but governments and policies are there to try and help for a larger audience. So why do we elect a few people there? Sure, maybe you like the personality, maybe you don't like the other guy, maybe you like what they said, maybe you like the way they look and speak. But at a level, you're kind of trusting people to do regulation for what's right for you and society. They may not do it all the time, they may do something completely different, there's a difference. But at a current level, that's what you have: a prime minister, a MP in Canada, or a member of Congress, your senator, whatever it is, to mayor in your city, to trust you for doing things that enrich your lives. And I think where the people are right now with AI, they will have to look at regulation. I mean, data privacy has been a big thing. You talk about data breaches all the time. We see how big cyber has become. Half the time I enter a password on some portal, they're like, oh, please check, there's been got some data breach hack. And I'm like, how do I keep track of 15 passwords, randomly? And you see about how much fraud. It's like, oh, please don't regulate banks. Well, then we had the financial crisis. We have had many things. So like, you have you have to find the Goldilocks formula. What is just right? And the irony is there's no just right, because the just right is also subjective. Not too hot, not too cold. That's what it is. So yes, I personally believe you need some regulation, because if you don't have regulation, it's what we get into this debates in this country on the NRA, on drones, or whatever else. They're like, oh, guns are to protect freedom. But are we sure about that? Does everyone who has a gun is... that was the case, then you wouldn't have mass shootings all of a sudden, right? So those are also very important right now. So, what you don't know can kill you, and especially no one really knows the extent of AI technology. Some people can prophesy, some people can say this. But in 1994, even Steve Ballmer or Bill Gates, who was in charge of Microsoft, couldn't predict what the internet's going to be. I'm pretty sure if Steve Jobs were alive, he'd be the first one telling me he couldn't predict what Apple is going to be. He could predict some of it. Yeah. Maybe he's made some of his predictions, but no one can, because, little secret, nobody knows the future.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about regulations, it's kind of there what you're saying, because you would have all these data breaches, but there's no option for you to buy anonymously, to say, look, there were so many data breaches that you did not hold my information properly, and now it's on the dark web, and you're not the only company. There's a website that you can keep seeing data breaches of hospitals and lawyers. But is there a way for me to go on Amazon and shop completely anonymously? They will say, no, that's impossible. Like, that is like you would have fraud and stuff like that, where on the opposite side where you do put your information and it does get breached, nothing happens. You're the one that needs to come up with 15 passwords and a password manager now to make sure that we can log into these things. And that's why I feel like the regulation has to come into a certain degree, because otherwise, I have calls with people that I'm asking, and this is a good question that maybe can help me answer. If you load your client's information and they say, hey, I need you to be like an accountant, and the accountant load the financial statements into his $200 ChatGPT premium higher tier, is that a breach of NDA? Is that a legal problem where there was a breach of the non-disclosure because the service provider load information from the client into a LLM model?
Maybe, and I think that's where the regulators will tell you what's there, what's not, right? I mean, a lot of this conversation on data regulation, data privacy, data storage, the right to be forgotten, for example, because again, that's everything has to have caveats, and just tie it into what I was saying earlier about journalism, right? There's free press, which you want, but there's also regulation on slander and not inciting. If I said Zivko is a completely criminal mastermind who is trying to take over the city and is going to unleash uranium and is going to do that, I'm like, hey, free speech, that's my free speech. But no, what I'm doing is I'm slandering you, but no, I'm not presenting any information. Okay, if that were true, what is my source? What is my information? What proof do I have? Oh, someone told me. I mean, so again, that's the concept of AI existing. You can't, the problem with people who get stuck in with 100% absolutes are people who are so dogmatic or who do not have empathy or just unable to have a conversation, right? So I just give an example right now how I said, I'm using my First Amendment free speech, but you use it responsibly, right? And again, responsibility is neither the beholder, but at the same time, there's a reason for that. Your responsibility is to make sure what your freedom is not inconveniencing someone else. As I once you joke, the right to move my fist ends when it comes close to your face, right? Like, it's like, oh, I'm just, and it's that. It's like, oh, I just want to collect all of Zivko's information because I want to curate his Netflix viewing information. I want to curate his web searches. I want to curate all that. Yes, but at what point are you holding on information that you shouldn't be having? How did you acquire that information? What happens if the data breach? Right? Oh, I just will hold on to your valuables in the bank for safekeeping, sure. But you're responsible if that gets looted, right? Because I've trusted you with that. So there's a lot of that elements as well that's important.
Yeah, I think it's that balance. That there is no absolutes. No one should shoot for absolutes. Somewhere in the middle, there is a place where it does work, and it's not even a compromise. It's just a place where you can find where this is not allowed because you're it's like breaching the NDA in essence if you load that information into LLM. Or the LLMs cannot do all these things. You have all these small tools that are coming up with make videos like MKBHD and Mr. Who's the Boss. Like, man, that guy spent like 15 years, blood, sweat, and tears, and you're just gonna load all of that and take his likeliness and his style overnight without even crafting or trying. These things are stuff that with a regulation you will know that. I'm pretty sure if you ask MKBHD, if you ask Mr. Who's the Boss, if you ask all these people, like, I never agreed to someone just take 15 years or 10 years of YouTube videos and kind of come up with all kinds of stuff that is now claimed to be theirs. It's not even giving me any sort of credit.
Exactly, this copyright and all of that. Like, we have that, right? Imagine someone like, oh, I really like this Beatles song. I like the Beatles. I'm not disrespecting. I'll just take that and make it better. I'll make it my own version for the 21st century. And how does it matter? Two of the Beatles are dead. John Lennon's dead. George Harrison's dead. Ringo's retired. Paul McCartney's too old. But no, there's still laws and regulation. You can't just take something and make it your own without buying the rights, giving credit, checking with them. I mean, the reason you get sued for this, right? Again, the regulation, think about the law, right? Then you can argue for and against. You can argue both sides. I mean, people need to understand that these are very complex tools, and with complex tools come complex regulation. Yes, the regulations can be boring, they can be monotonous, they may not be good policy. There's laws can be changed, policy can be changed. There's something called universal truth, which should be the same. And what the problem with people who don't understand that is we use regulation, the bad word. We use bureaucracy is a bad word. Imagine when you're growing up, you always heard about, oh, politics is dirty, politics is bad. So you just, for every politician is bad, without understanding that these are public servants also, they're there to fulfill this. And how do you improve? You should critique them, not castigate them, unless they deserve to be castigated, right? So when we use certain terms and we just kind of paint a picture of it, then then it becomes something, right? It's like all lawyers are argumentative, all bankers are rich and corrupt. It's not, it doesn't help when you look at absolutes.
It's absolutely true. Don't look at absolutes. There's something beautiful somewhere there in the middle. Akshobh, thank you so much for the time. This was a lot of information that I think people should just take it and think about it. It's food for thought. It is not about arguments. It's not about divisiveness. But these things are part of our life. And whether that be in business, whether that be in how we communicate or how we consume communication, things that they're good conversations at least to have, as opposed to just doom scrolling and doing nothing. So I do appreciate the time that you spent with us today. If someone wants to get a hold of you and they want to talk with you or call you on a show to talk with them or anything like that, how do people get a hold of you?
That's great. My website, akshobh.com. My contact details, drop me an email from there, or at Akshobh on Twitter and X. My DMs are open. Drop me a line or connect with me on LinkedIn. With my name, it's very easy to find me. Let's connect, and let's love to talk to you on your show. I love to have you on my show if it aligns, or more importantly, I love to collaborate. I love to have conversations with yourself, Zivko. So thank you so much for the time, guys.